So as we begin with plyometrics, there are definitely some things that we can work on before and that I highly recommend. And as all of you have different dogs, when we look at the different jumping styles, some dogs are very good with their bodies, others not so much. Um, Whenever, as I mentioned, be critical of how your dogs are jumping. When we look at the photos and we see that dogs have a nice level top line, that is what we're shooting for. When we start to see a dip in a top line or an arch, the dogs are getting tired, or they may just not have the greatest form. So it's important to take a look at that. So I always ask owners, have friends, take still shots or video and just freeze frame and look and see how your dog is jumping, especially if you are involved in sports. So how is your dog looking at the end of the day, or the last run in agility, or the last run in flyball, or obedience, or anything like that? So take a look and see what they're looking like. Compare them to the beginning of the day, because ideally we want to see the same. So one of the things I like to start with is that the dog is able to have balance and proprioception to move over cavalettes. And I will typically just set up, the first picture is, or shower curtain rods. So they're just with compression spring, and they could be fit to any hallway. And most hardware stores have them, and you could set them up and have the dogs walk over them. We never want them to go above um, the level of the hock. So sometimes I see them set way too high, and we're causing some stressors or abnormalities in the rest of the body. So just having the dog walk back and forth, I will typically start with the cavaletti spaced about 1 to 1.5 body lengths. The other, you can set up cavalettis or poles and just work on turning. So this is a great balance and coordination exercise. Or just set up, if you have the opportunity to go to the beach and you see logs set up and that sort of stuff, to um, have the dogs just walk over a lot of different obstacles, and then we'll start to build up. As you begin, the dog should ideally be able to trot over the cavalettis. And as I mentioned before, I'm also looking that they should be able to perform at least 10 minutes of core work. So when we look at the core work, we're going to look at the different things to set up, all that sort of stuff. And the core work is going to fit into the cavaletti work. So again, with the cavalettis, here's a Tibetan Terrier working on, this was an agility dog, and we were working on some balance and proprioception. So starting low and just having him walk over the cavalettis. And here's a little bit of a guideline. So start with walking. And again, this is going to assist with balance, proprioception, and range of motion. If they cannot do this, they should not step ahead to plyometrics. So if the dogs are not able to pick their feet up, if they're not able to gauge their body, this is not going to work. So plyometrics is not going to be for them. We can work on different speeds. So start with a walk and then progress to a trot. And anywhere from 5 to 10 cavalettis or rails are great to begin with. So this will get the dog moving. If you only have 5, it's fine. No worries at all. And as I mentioned, we never want to go above the level of the hock when working with this. And ideally, working with this for 5 to 10 minutes a day. So it's a great activity, and it's a stepping stone into plyometrics. Again, as I mentioned, working with balance and proprioception and moving along there. So looking at all of that. Then one of my favorite activities to lead into plyometric is bungee work. So, this is one of my wonderful fitness trainer students' dogs demonstrating a harness, and this is a sled dog harness, and they're one of my favorite. There are two links here to purchase harnesses. They're fairly inexpensive, and there are measurements that can be taken place there. But you want ideally a properly fitted harness because there's going to be a lot of pulling here. In my clinic, we don't have all these harnesses to fit different size dogs. So typically we're testing a simple harness out, looking for the pull, and then recommending one of these harnesses. So as I mentioned, you can look, these are two websites that go through the best sled dog harnesses. They're fairly light, and you'll have to play around with different body types. The harness fit, we can see how it's fitting from in the front and then dispersing the pull. So dogs with flat top lines, or arch top lines, or like your sight hounds may have a tougher fit. Sight hounds usually are a little bit more difficult to fit with these things. Then when we look at the bungees, so I mentioned the harnesses. If you have never a front pull harness, but if you have a harness that clips in the back, that is fine to start with, and then you can progress. Never on a collar, so we never want to do that. Bungees are available at most home goods stores or hardware stores like Target or similar stores. Get a few bungees if you can. I recommend 6 feet in length, and the harnesses will have either a clip or a hook that you can hook onto the harness. Of course, safety here, we want to make sure that this is not going to snap back at you. If you can afford to buy a couple of them, buy a few different tensions. So, look at the size of your dog. If you have a Chihuahua, you're going to need a fairly low level bungee cord. If you have a working German Shepherd, you're going to need a thicker one. So just go in between. And this German Shepherd is working on a bungee. We actually have him working on a sit on a disc. So he is working isometrically as well as eccentrically and concentrically to get there. So lots of things going on, and bungee work is pretty exhausting. When we're working with a bungee, it's a combination of concentric, eccentric, and isometric. So you have a little bit of that lengthening that we do with the plyometric activity, a little bit of the shortening, the concentric, and then the isometrics, just holding a contraction. So it is a full body workout, especially when beginning. Dogs fatigue pretty quickly. So don't be dismayed if you do a couple of these exercises and your dog is pretty tired. You'll need to respect that fatigue. So it's important to look at. Also, some dogs don't do great with this because it involves them pulling. So if you taught your dog not to pull, it may not be great for you. In this picture, I have one of my technicians is securing the bungee. She's getting a workout too, but we have this dog stepping over an unstable surface to work a little bit more. So when we're doing the bungee work, ideally we want to work on a phthalate-free yoga mat or something similar, because the dog is really holding on. I don't want any chemicals going in, so that's why I always say phthalate-free. We're going to have them step forward, pause, and return. And it may only be 1 or 2 sets, and then they come back. So the moving forward, pause, and coming back should be controlled. Important all the way around. And then this can be done 3 to 4 times a week. As I mentioned, we're going to begin slow and respect boundaries. We want the bungee to be parallel with the dog's back. This is often a mistake. The bungee is up too high and the dog is pulling too much on their shoulders. So we want the bungee to be parallel with the dog's back. Rest when needed. So I will take some of my search and rescue dogs. They'll start out with this and only be able to do 3 or 4 pulls and then they're done. So in total, maybe 1 minute of activity and we're taking a break with it, which is absolutely fine. Every dog is going to be an individual and we're going to respect that. So as I mentioned, when we look at the pull, we're going to come straight forward. And this is a fairly verbal German Shepherd that I work with. And we'll see him come forward. He sits and then he barks on his way back. But so he's coming forward, he sits, and then we slowly have him come back. And the sitting is fine as long as we're controlled. So all good with all of that. So just a couple steps forward and then coming back. Then when we look at the jumping, so this is one of my gun dogs, or hunting dogs, I should say, field trial. And he recovered from an iliopsoas injury, and jumping was a huge part of his work. So we started on a good surface. So this is something like a gym flooring, grass, as long as it's not slippery. We don't want it to be too hot or too cold. So in the beginning, we're going to only begin with 5 to 10 jumps. So you can set up, if you have 5 jumps, fine. If you only have 3, that's okay too. So set up what you have, and we're going to look at a distance of, we'll start with about 1.5 times the body length to 2 lengths. And I'll say that again on the next slide. The height, we're going to start off lower than the dog would normally jump. So if you have an agility dog and you normally jump the dog at 24 inches, we're going to set the jumps at 12 inches. So we're going to go lower. I'm more interested with the dog jumping, landing, and taking off. So we'll have the dog go through anywhere from the 3 to 10 jumps. 10 is going to be a lot. But if your dog is very fit, go ahead and go with that. Do what you have. You do you with your dog. So have the dog go through. You're going to rest 30 seconds. Repeat it 3 to 4 times. That is all you're going to do to start. Because this is a repetitive activity, we don't want to push too far. Remember, this is we're working the neurological system as well as the musculoskeletal system. So we're watching for soreness. When we're setting the jumps, as I mentioned, as a guide, begin with approximately 1.5 to 2 body lengths. So if you have a giant schnauzer and your giant schnauzer is 2 feet from we're going to measure from the tip of their nose to the base of their tail. So if your dog is 2 feet, we're going to start with a distance of 4 feet. This is going to need to be adjusted. Not every dog is going to fall into that. So again, you do you for your dog. The goal is going to be for the dog to land and immediately bound up. So again, they're going to coil down and come up. So what distance is going to work? You may need to narrow it. So do what you need to do. Surface is crucial. So again, this is not something you want to do on a cement floor, a wood floor. It needs to be a good flooring. With the progressions, we're going to perform this every other day, so 48 hours between, or 3 times per week. We're going to have a nice, comfortable distance. After you've done the initial, so whatever jumps you have, you repeat that, and everything is going well, you can increase the number of repetitions by 1 to 2 after 2 weeks. And I know it's a slow progress, but again, we're training the neurological system as well as the muscular system. So we don't want to push. If the dog is comfortable with 5 repetitions of 10, go ahead and increase the height of the jump. And typically, what I'll do is increase it by 25%. So if the dog is jumping 10 inches, set the jump now at 12 and a half, 13 inches, and certainly play around with that. Some dogs can definitely go to their agility height. If they're jumping, you're working on that, or a fly ball or obedience. Others are going to have to stay at a low level. Again, you do you with your dog. Your progressions, of course, are going to depend upon the dog's goals. So non-performance dogs, maybe you're just going to set some baseline jumps up, and this is going to be part of your program once a week. That's fine. With your performance dogs, you may want to factor this in 2 to 3 times a week. Things that you will need to consider with a performance dog are there competitions? Because you certainly don't want to be working on plyometric activities while at an agility trial or a fly ball trial, because you will burn the dog out in more ways than one. So this is something you want to work on your off time. And then certainly you're going to look at increasing their jump height. And you can also start to do semicircles. You could set jumps up or turns with the jumps and all of that. So just depending upon what you need to do. The goals of plyometrics, we're going to mimic the activity the dog is going to perform in real everyday life. So think of that front yard. We want to initiate those explosive movements that will mimic their life. And this is something that's going to be safe and effective. For your homework, what I'd like you to do, if you're able to, demonstrate the bungee work. So if you're able to do this and get a harness and some bungees, fantastic. So just show me some of that. If you're not able to do that, show me some core work that you do. And then I would like to see you set up a jumping sequence to your comfort level. So whether you have 3 jumps, 5 or 10, show me what your dog can do and show me that jumping, that landing. And this is not something that may be, able to do right away on the initial takeoff. So this will require a little bit of practice. So we'll work with that and then I will get back to you. Thank you so much.